robots, something that we are actively developing in the office to ensure that we remain efficient and we remain relevant. As mentioned, we are driving a strategy to improve operational processes using technology and looking into our audit methodologies to ensure that it's fit for purpose and improve our audit efficiencies. As mentioned, we intend to leverage technology by automating our business processes and audit processes. We do believe that the team led by the Chief Technology Officer is doing a very good job in developing the right technology to assist us in doing this. The investment in technology, Honorable Chair, will result in a move in the structure of the cost that will move from a human aspect to technology. This will not translate into hours and rate, as technology will eliminate the mundane tasks that are currently done by people through automating our processes. Whilst our funding model has been financially sound to fund operations and minor CapEx projects in the past, it has, however, been unable to fund major CapEx projects, and we're going to be undertaking some major CapEx projects to catch up in terms of our audit process, but also our internal operation. The reviewed funding model will be shared with SCOEC for consideration and approval once it has been finalized. The Chief Financial Officer, Polani, is leading the team that is looking into our funding model, and major progress has been made in putting that model in place. After it has gone through the internal approval process, we will subject that, we will share that model with Honorable Chair and members for your approval. Chair, I'd like to talk about our data at this stage. As mentioned, we get our money by charging our auditees for the time that we spend doing the audit. It's nice and good to charge, but it's also important that the money that we charge eventually find its way into our bank account. As it stands, Chair, over 1.1 billion as of 31st of March was owed to us by our auditees. It's quite a significant amount, Chair. And while we try by all means to ensure that we are efficient in our operations, it is important that the committee emphasized to our stakeholders, especially our auditees, the importance of paying for the audit fees. In terms of the main pain point, Chair, the local government, which currently, as of 31st March, they owed us 45% of the 1.5. Of concern is the fact that 249 million was in days of 120 days, meaning that it's long outstanding, some going into years. We also see that the state-owned entities owe us 29%, and 144 million, Chair, was over 120 days, meaning it's long outstanding. Chair, in terms of our discussion, and we've had this discussion in the past, there has been certain entities that has been financially distressed, such as the Dinel Group. It's encouraging, though, that they've made commitment to start paying, and we've seen them in the past 2 months making some payment to reduce their long outstanding debt, and that is encouraging. There are other entities such as SAPO that owes us 30 million, and we've been able to recover the long outstanding debt that was there previously from SAA. But other entities such as SA Express, given the fact that they've already been liquidated, the prospect of us getting that money is very slim. But we continue to have engagement with National Treasury to see as to whether there could be ways in which we do get the money. We've used a method, Chair, of ring-fencing all debts with auditees to enable them to catch up with long outstanding debt. Unfortunately, they do not always honor that. We'll encourage our auditees who are financially struggling to stick to the ring-fencing agreement, because what we do with that instrument is to take the old debt, put it into one basket, and have an agreement as to how do we pay it over the period so that they can properly budget for it. Chen, I would like to talk about the local government and the 1% allocation. You will know that in the past, National Treasury used to pay us for the local government entities that were in financial distress. We are encouraged by the fact that for the first time, National Treasury has budgeted the full budget in terms of what we expect to recover. In the past, they used to pay us, as shown in that table, they used to pay us a lower amount. And I think through the engagement and the involvement of this committee, National Treasury has come to the party, and we would like to thank the committee for your assistance in getting us to get the full recovery. We do believe by National Treasury paying us the full amount, it will assist us in our budgeting, because we can calculate upfront as to how much do we anticipate to be utilized as part of this particular lever. And getting the full allocation allow us to execute our business per plan. Chair, I'd like to move now to the outstanding debt that's owed by the state-owned entities, because a significant amount is tied up in that. There's been a number of entities, and I mentioned denial earlier on, and it's been very encouraging that they've made a commitment to start paying us 8 million, and they're paying us that particular 8 million. There are a number of entities such as STAPO, which are struggling to pay us, and it will be important that we do get paid. Transnet pays us. It's just here and a big number just because of the amount of work that we do. So we appreciate the continued support. Chair, while we need to maintain our financial independence, it's important that the entities that we audit prioritize paying for their audit commitment. And we'd like to urge the committee to encourage the board members to ensure that they budget accordingly to put funds aside to pay for the audit services. Chair, I'd like to move on to talk a little bit about our material irregularities. In our engagement with your committee on Wednesday, you emphasized the fact that the material irregularity is a very valuable weapon. Some honorable members use the word AK-47, and they told us that we must continue using it. So I'd like to share with the committee the cost aspect that we have been incurring to date in terms of what the MI process looks like. We've been incurring the cost of, if you look in 2021, the cost that we incurred on the MI process was about 104. In 2023, it was about 110, and we project that for this current year, it's going to be 117 million. We appreciate that through this committee to support, National Treasury has been reimbursing us for some of the work that we are not, sorry, Chair, I mean, National Treasury has been paying us an amount of 50 million on an annual basis towards the MI process. That amount has not been adequate. Hence, in my opening remarks, I mentioned that at the moment, we are having discussions with National Treasury to up that amount to 100 million. However, we have had the committee in terms of you wanting us to fully ramp up the MI process. And as part of the funding model, we're going to look into how do we get the MI to be properly funded for us to fully utilize this weapon that we have encouraged us to utilize. It's always good, Chair, to always, when you're spending money, to look into what is the benefits that we are getting. When we're with you on Wednesday, Auditor-General Maluleke shared with you some of the successes that we have realized as part of the MFMA cycle where we have used the MI process. There's been an increase in the number of financial statements that are submitted on time for us to audit. And that was achieved because we issued MIs to those entities that were not giving us those financials. There's been an increase in entities that were, there's been a reduction in entities that were previously been given the adverse audit opinion. And that was achieved because we issued MIs to those entities. So this is an instrument that is working, Chair. Besides that, there's been financial benefit in terms of funds that were recovered and funds that were stopped from continuous loss from the fiscus. And we do appreciate this. So for us to fully utilize this, we are going to look into ways that we need to first increase our internal capacity, but also embed it in the entire audit machinery. So, Chair, we are going to come back to you with a proper plan as to how do we intend us to get the appropriate funding for this. About the page, Chair, I'm just reminding you about the successes that relates to the PFMA cycle. So we can appreciate that for a small investment that we've been making in the MI process internally, the benefits to the fiscals has been significant. In terms of when we met with you last year to this sometimes in the past, where we discussed with you the MI process for the PFMA, we shared with you that for the PFMA cycle, where we have issued MIs, auditees have taken action to the tune of 14 million, the funds were recovered. To the tune of 636 million, funds that could have been lost were prevented from being lost from the state. And 509 million, excuse me, Chair, financial losses were recovered. We see the internal control environment being strengthened. So, Chair, we do agree with you that the MI process is working, and we are looking into ways that we're going to fund it to get the full benefits of the MI process. I mentioned earlier that we're going to have to spend some time looking into our technology requirement. As part of the culture shift strategy, the organization will embark on capital investment program on the digitization of our business to ensure that we improve our operational processes and leverage technology by automating our audit processes and the business support side. This will require significant financial investment over the next 5 years or so. We are exploring the funding options of this capital investment as part of the funding model. Importantly, it will be us being able to retain our surpluses. It will be us being able to gradually increase our margins to ensure that we become much more efficient on how we're doing things. But ultimately, it will need our auditees to pay us the fees that we have charged them. Chair, at this stage, you have asked us as to what is our request. I remember when we met on Wednesday, there were a number of comments that came to say, what do we need? And at this stage, what we'd like to emphasize is that we are reviewing our funding model, which will be shared with you in due course for your consideration and approval, and once it has been finalized. So at that stage, we're not yet ready to ask for approval, and we're looking into a way that will ensure that we are fully funded to continue to execute our mandate. As an office chair, we require you to continue to approve the retention of the surpluses. In the past, you have been very supportive. It's just that those surpluses are tied up in debtors. Chair, as mentioned, as of the 31st of March, 1.1 billion that should have been in our bank account is currently sitting in the bank accounts of our auditees. We would like SCOWAC as a committee to encourage our auditees to pay us. So that will be important. If we can collect the money that is outstanding, Chair, we should be able to execute our digital transformation journey. So it's important that we follow all means, and we're looking into ways internally as to how do we work better with our auditees for them to start paying us those long outstanding debts. Chair, you mentioned that in most cases we are called upon as the AGSA to do real-time audit. Last year we were called through to go and assist by doing real-time audit when the disaster in KZN, Eastern Cape, and to some extent Northwest happened. It's important that whenever we are called to do that, we need to find a way to ensure that the costs that we incurred are funded. We are encouraged by the fact that for the disaster process, the auditees have committed to pay us, and we'll continue to ask the committee to encourage whenever there are these calls for us to intervene by doing real-time audit, that we find a way to fund it. In instances where the auditees are not able to fund it, we are going to engage National Treasury to ensure that our costs are recovered. Chair, that is the presentation that we had for you. I would like to hand over back to AG Tsakani Maluleke and back to the committee for further deliberations. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you very much, DAG. And Honorable Chair, the presentation, I think, has covered broadly the reminding the honorable members what the model entails, and contextualizing some of the concerns we've been raising when we deal with budgets as well as with the annual report. And it has also served to provide you with some insight on what our thinking is around what the future would look like. Once again, I would want to thank the honorable members of SCOAG, led by you, Honorable Chair, for the opportunity to engage in this more detailed way on the funding matters, and also the support that we've enjoyed from SCOAG over the last period around ensuring that the funds that should be paid to the office are making their way through. I'll now hand back to you, Honorable Chair. Thank you.
Thank you very much, AGDAG, on your presentation. What we could be looking at is that you are giving us work in progress around the funding model, and the key areas which are categorizing the model itself is to follow the mission of the entity, the institution, and based on that mission, you'd look into key critical areas which ought to follow that kind of an approach and strategy. One critical area is the fact that there is growth in technology demand, which travels through your own office for your capability, but to keep in line with your auditees. And to do so, you must as well match that for your full benefit going forward. So you are probably looking into that. You're saying, here we are, we're not currently in deficit. We are enjoying some kind of a plus benefit in terms of our own books, and we would want to utilize whatever we have around such surplus to fund enhancement of technology, something which we have given to yourselves in the past, and probably would want to get at some stage a sense of progress around that matter. But here you are, you're saying you're still progressing quite well in as far as such is concerned, and through the realization of that surplus, you would want to utilize it in the same aspect and other matters which are going to be of an operational nature going forward. Maybe it might be of necessity to categorize even the surplus we're talking about, or it might be that the terminology that we use as a surplus modeling your financial attendant would need some form of redefinition. Redefinition because, one, is it indeed wise to work on a hand-to-mouth basis? I'm using the simple somewhat accounting realization, because through your tariffs you get payments, and when you receive those payments, you would through your own budget direct such payments accordingly, and the utilization of such amounts ought to be enjoyed within a financial year, and whatever then is left out of that, you term it surpluses. And the nature of your office is the office which is more dependent on the tariff charges in a majority of instances. Well, 99% of your own operation would lead into that. And if then there's a realization of leftovers out of it, as termed surpluses, you'd require that you make some approvals on your plans around those, probably advised by your audit and risk committee on those matters which are critical from yourselves as the DAG's responsibility as an accounting officer is concerned. And talking about remodeling, probably looking into the nature of such, it might as well a time for yourselves to look into that, because the accounting practice is driving you towards an annual drive of expenditure, and anything beyond that on what to get, which is of a public entity, would have to go into your surplus kitty, but you are not realizing any profits, as it would be in the case, because you're not profit driven. You are providing that kind of a service. So those are the kinds of things which I think at some stage we need to look into. And secondly, in terms of your income, would look into how is that income derived, which I've indicated in the main, which is through tariffs and the sum amount which you would get from Treasury. So far, it's about 50 million rand, something which we need to create a sense of a stable knowledge that that amount would come from time to time as required. But taking so, looking into your independence and safeguard your independence quite firmly on such receipts. And the area which is a very big one is a debt which stands at 1.1. Members might have interest on such as to how can we find a better way of dealing with it. You have highlighted that the majority of it comes from local government, SOEs, and other auditees have their own contribution on such, and we need to probably look into better ways of getting that money back. There it is, colleagues. I thought that let me just create that summation as far as the presentation is concerned. Thank you very much, AG and the AG, your team, on the presentation. Colleagues? Just trying to get, there's one hand, Honorable Matuba, Honorable Matafa would follow. Those two hands so far.
Thank you very much, Honorable Chair. Good morning to Chair, Honorable Members, AG and AG Team AGSA. Chair, let me welcome the presentation from the Office of the Auditor-General. However, I do have 2 to 3 questions to ask. It's clarity-seeking question. But let me start with another method that I may want the AG to look into, whether if they introduce an incentive in a particular way that to encourage especially debtors, to say to them, we'll be able to give you a particular discount if you pay within a period maybe of, let's say, a period of 6 months or a period of 3 months, we'll be able to give a particular discount. One will look into the fact that in most cases, the auditees will not pay their debts timely, but rather the interest accrued in terms of what they have between them and the SG. They can look into that if they introduce particular incentives so that they can be able to encourage the auditors to pay termlessly, and they can be able to save from their part, and also from our part, we are able to recoup a certain percentage that they may owe us. That is the first contribution, Chair. And the second one, in terms of the agreement, the ring fencing agreement, whether can't we also find a way, because when you listen to the presentation that was made by the DAG, is the fact sometimes they default from the initial agreement that is there, but in this instance, there should be consequences when the auditors are not able to honor that particular request that has been made, Chair. I think if they can also look into that, it will to improve the level. There must be consequences. You can't ring-fence at the end of the day. You redirect the money which was meant for audit purposes to a particular cause as an auditee. And Chair, whilst one is talking on the matter of the debt owed, one would want to ask in relation to that, whether the AG have a particular way of writing off debts as bad debt, or in other instances, the debtors pay as expected. One would want to check with Office of the AG in relation to that, whether are there instances where they write off debts. And to Chair, it's good that we are changing. We are beginning to tackle the issue of the fourth industrial revolution, which is technology, of course. But one is asking herself that although it's a best way, it's efficient way, it's a very good way. And when are we going to introduce that technology method? Whether are we going to implement this current financial year, or it will be on the outer years? One would want to get clarity with regards to that. And when we use technology, is it not going to impact on knowing that technology can be used to make things efficient and quick, but at the same time, people are going to lose their jobs in terms of what we are intending to do, with a good spirit of saving cabin costs from our point. But when you look at technology itself, there are disadvantages in terms of that of the technology. Is there any system or process that will be used to phase out this particular process that we are in when we want to adapt to new technologies? And Chair, one would also want to know, as the last question, to check whether the SG whether they have received a proposal for donations, and also recognizing that the AG is a Chapter 9 institution which strengthens democracy. And whether would government increasing its allocation to the Auditor-General of South Africa office impacts in its dependence, and the AG can develop a case of the cost benefit of increased funding by the state. I'm not quite sure, but these are the things that one would want to ask the AG going forward. I know for the fact that litigation should not be our last resort, because we are working with government departments and state-owned enterprise. How can we possibly avoid these litigations as much as we can? And where we need to intervene as COWEC, let's definitely do that, because we feel that the office is doing quite well, and we may want to help. If there's any intervention that we can make, let them make recommendations with regards to that. That will be my contribution, Chair, and thank you, Chair. Lastly, Chair, I'm traveling. If something happens during the process that I'm being kicked out, you must know that its network. I will be traveling this morning. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you very much, Honorable Matuba, for that contribution. We'll take note of your latter part in terms of apology. Thank you very much for your contribution. Honorable Tafa, and then Honorable Kota will follow. So,
thank you very much, Chair. Good morning to you, Chairperson. Good morning, AG, DAG, and the team, members of the platform, and other guests. Chairperson, I'm going to be very brief, simply because of the inputs that you have made immediately after the presentation and some areas that Honorable Matuba has covered on. But just to thank the Office of the AG for the presentation, but also just to underscore the support that we give to the AG, which the DAG has mentioned as well, that they are appreciative of. And for us, Chair, it comes very easy because the work that the AGSA does and then eventually presents to us, it's par excellence. And members did indicate yesterday that the professionalism that the office displays is one that needs to be commended and supported in every aspect. So we stand ready to be able to assist. And like you did say, Chair, this is work in progress. And I'm happy that there is an undertaking of reviewing the funding model, particularly paying attention on the costs associated with the MI process, as well as the culture shift strategic plan that requires implementation. Chair, this is in line with the one questions that I have posted to the AG when it was presented to us in one of our committees, that the intention is to take on other state-owned entities. And I asked about the resource capacity that exists within the office of the AG. And in that meeting, the AG responded that as and when the work commences and moves forward, there will be constant assessment of the financial needs or any other additional resource requirements. Then they will be able to come to us and present to us. And this presentation today, Chair, aligns squarely with that commitment. And we are very happy to see this kind of presentation, so that as and when we move, we are able to identify the time pressures as well as the financial pressures that the AGSA must face or will face as a result of responsibilities assigned to them. So, Chair, with those short words, I wanted to appreciate the presentation and you giving me the opportunity to engage in the discussion. But once again, we are ready to assist and we look forward to receiving those 3 plans: the review funding model, the MI process plan, as well as the culture shift expenditure plan. And we'll obviously be willing to engage with those. I will pause there, Chair. Thank you very much once again.
thank you very much, Honorable Matafa. Thanks for your insightful engagements and the fact that a point of emphasis that ours is to assist and propel functionality of the Office of the Auditor-General. Thanks for such contribution. So, Mamkota.
Thank you very much, Chairperson. Thank you, AG. Thank you, DAG. Let me say thank you to AG for the coverage, the media coverage that you have received after the presentation with us the other day. It was very, very positive. I just want to say, firstly, we support the 50 million from Treasury, that you get that money from Treasury. I think you deserve it. But I also welcome your move towards investment on automation. It's critical that we move robotic. But robotic movement goes hand in hand with the loss of personnel. I hope some homework has been done in terms of training the personnel and retaining the personnel. The other issue is the issue of the debt which is held by the auditors, why don't we get penalties? Find out because you're a Chapter 9 institution, you cannot do penalties. But I think some way of penalties is necessary. They must pay back the money. You can't have people who are having all debt and go as if nothing has happened. I think it's important that we do something drastic as far as that is concerned. Lastly, is the issue of the SOEs. SOEs do have money. I don't understand the fact that they don't want to pay you. They're taking chances because you're a Chapter 9 institution. I think you must move towards business model. Ensure that there must be understanding that you are not running a welfare society. You are here to make sure that at the end of the day, there's funding for money, there's value for money on the side of government. So thank you very much. Comrades have said lots of things. I don't want to meddle in that mud. Thanks very much, Chairperson.
Thank you, Mazo Kota, for that contribution, which goes towards the recognition of the areas of funding, what need to be enhanced around such the sense of inculcation of discipline on the auditees, which is the area that you have emphasized. Honorable Singh, welcome.
No, thank you very much, Chair. I've been with you, but a bit of erratic network, and good morning to the AG's team and all our colleagues that are there. I can't agree more with Honorable Kota. And I think I heard those three words before somewhere else, but we won't talk about that. Pay back the money. Of course, they have to pay back the money. And if it's SOEs that are not paying, I mean, it's just criminal that they're not doing that. So I think the office of the AG, while they are saying to us that they're trying different methods and even litigation, they must exert more pressure on particularly government departments, SOEs, and to pay the money. To that, what I'd like to ask also of the AG is, Chairperson, are there any disputes with regard to the fees, from the side of the SOEs and or the local government municipalities, or are they very much aware of what the fees are going to be, before it's even invoiced out to them? And then, name and shame must be the order of the day. And I think Honorable Tuba early on spoke about technology, which is something that we all embrace. But I'd just like to know if the HR department of the AG are taking the team along, the entire team, because people don't like to be replaced by machines, although we want more efficiency. And lastly, I think on the question of the investments and the reserves, I'm glad that the money is being used for performance auditing, because we would hate some of those that owe money saying, well, you've got a lot of money in your kitty. Now, why are you putting pressure on us? So just comments on that. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you very much, Honorable Singh. And I think that the value of the propositions in as far as the reserves are concerned are weighed in basically to begin to work in a more spirit which is going to get deeper on performance, which matches the value of money at the level of government broadly based on their own plans. Something which we have to somewhat support. I think you're referencing to such, and then your question, which the AGM was noting, on whether there are disputes on any charges or debt various auditees. Thank you very much, Honorable Singh. Honorable Menzana.
Good morning, Chairperson. Perhaps just to show that I'm still alive.
You don't look alive.
My picture is the video. As long as you can see that, at least I'm alive. Look, for starters, let me also echo what has been raised by my colleagues. First one, welcoming this.
Oh, PTU.
And secondly, adding on what Honorable Zokota has just raised, all African public is welcomed. Come again? Go on.
No, you're doing well. You're doing well now. You're doing well now. Continue.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. I was saying, Chair, the second one would be to echo what Honorable Zokota was raising in terms of the manner in which the South African public welcomed the AGSA report, which was tabled on Wednesday. Here, you know, my passion is on funding of AGSA. I'm happy with the proposed 60 million. It's growing a little. I think we're moving up from 50, now 60, and it's gradually getting to what we want. But then my suggestion, Chair, around can't we interact with our sister standing committee on appropriations? That we somehow, as appropriations allocates budget to these oddities, the money which is supposed to be going to AGSA goes directly. I'm not sure of the legality of it. I'm thinking aloud. But then I will be advised accordingly. Thanks, Chairperson.
Yeah. Thanks, Honorable Blazer. You see, I'm thinking because we are getting into what is very critical. You know, I've read the relevant constitutional basis of the founding of the Office of the Auditor-General of South Africa. And there they say the Auditor-General must audit each and every institution that receives money. I'm just paraphrasing it, receiving money from the fiscus. That then presupposes that kind of injunction, which presents a no-choice situation, begins to direct the office to do so. The resource-based must be guaranteed for such. I know for a fact we, as the Constitution does, we are wary of permeations which might get towards a sense to influence some form of independence. But here are the courts, here are the, you see, justice institutions and so forth who are acting independently as well, founded in their own way, but directed by the Constitution as a separate arm of the state and so forth. So all those receiving money from the state in a way. What is a topic on its own. So the time would come when we have to think about what you're saying, Honorable Mlenza, which is a very critical point that we must look into, because those auditees get their funds from the fiscus, and then they would directly do whatever is to be paid to the AG based on the tariffs in a way. So moving towards predictability, we need to think about it as to what is the best mode of getting into that. Secondly, is that the AG contributes into savings. If you look into the MIs as they were reported to us as part of the MFMA currently, there have been savings as part of that process. And meaning, therefore, it's not only the contribution around presenting the face of the books, the financials assessment based on that. It's as well a contribution into make bearable savings, which would get back into fiscus one way or the other, or rather deepen the attendant to service delivery by various auditees. So that contribution itself has got a price tag. It's got a price tag of its own because it tells us how much the Office of the Auditor-General has saved during this time of the audit. And if you look into it against what the Treasury would vote for, the slice of the Office of the Auditor-General, you look into that MFMA savings, look into what in totality Treasury would put aside for the Office of the Auditor-General, 50 million rand, and I'm used to 1,000 rands. I'm not using 50 million rands, and that alone is probably something that we need to look into. Maybe AG would comment on that. And the last point, which I would have wanted to make reference to, is a point which says, or a question which would say, in looking into those who owe, probably at a local level, can you make some assessment as to whether are they not the same as those who are paying heavily towards consultants, and in such payments towards consultants, and they choose to fail to pay for the services of the Auditor-General? What sort of a link is created there? Is there any link of such? And therefore, the areas which Honorable Matuba referred to become very critical for something to consider going forward, and probably as part of your plan to make that presentation. And then the last area, very last one, which is an area which relate to technology, a reference to robotics. You know, colleagues, there's nothing as bad as getting into unbalanced proportion in the scale of the same move. You see, I watched this. Let me put it as motor racing on Sundays. You see, find that it's Mercedes-Benz this time around, Ferrari this other, and this, you know, and then you begin to doubt the actual match of such in terms of their own performance and the dominance of a particular, you see, defined choice for conquering in that field. That is the case in the Office of the Auditor-General to match their own auditees. There are institutions which they're not auditing. They're not auditing. It's very private. There are entities which they would have to audit, which are of a public nature. you know, they make use of robotics, they make use of high technology, advanced, you see, systems. And if you're going to send there someone who carries files, you see the files, this file, you see, pushes trolleys of paper and this, that, and it takes time to do its own work, you'd find out that the office is left behind. So they must match, you see, their field so that they could do things in an appropriate way. But we must take note of the fact that while you do so, you don't lose the fact that they are people who are somewhat employed. And retraining could be very critical for those, and find a better way of dealing with these things going forward. So you have those considerations in moving forward, and as well from our side, having engagements with appropriation and the see how best we could deal with those areas. Honorable Mlenza and Honorable Matafa have been very useful because they serve in that committee and to advance thinking on our behalf internally in a substantive way. AG, back to you.
Thank you very much, Honourable Chair, and thank you to the honourable members for their questions and comments. I'd like to start by acknowledging the compliments following the MFMA tabling and the media coverage. Indeed, Team AGSA stands proud about the product we've been able to deliver with the support of SCOAG and the resonance of the audit message that we've been able to share. Our aspiration remains to ensure that the audit insights we share are reflective of the lived experience of citizens, that the work we do is relevant in a way that allows us to genuinely deserve our independence. So that's quite important to us. So thank you to the honourable members that articulated those compliments. I will touch on a couple of matters, and then I'll ask the DAG to comment on the questions and insights that were sought around the technology and the advancement there, the investments we need to make, and the impact on people. And then also on the debtors, how we are ring fencing, whether we are charging penalties and whether there's an opportunity to do so, and the matter of write-offs, if there have been any. And then there's an area that he is quite passionate about, around the matter that you raised, Honourable Chair, on the consultants that are paid by municipalities and yet the AGSA is not paid. And I think the DAG will be able to comment on that. But just on a couple of other questions that were raised by the honourable members, I'd like to highlight that, Honourable Matuba, we've not run into proposals around donations. It can be an easily complicated matter, especially for an institution such as ours. So we've steered clear of that for many years. And so that's not part of our proposals at this time. In terms of the opportunity, Honourable Chair, to relook at how we deal with the surplus, what level of surplus we would want to keep going forward, so that we're not living hand to mouth, that we have the type of resources available to make the long-range investments, the long-term investments we must. I think that's going to be part of the funding model that the team is working on and will be able to present to SCOAG for consideration, as the DAG indicated. And then in terms of the 3 plans that Honourable Matafa, you are wanting us to work on, I think the team has heard you. The expectation is that we give you some clarity about how we're going to fund the culture shift strategy, how we're going to fund the MI processes long term, and also the reviewed funding model in broader terms. So I think the team is quite clear on that. I just want to make sure that I've dealt with the other matters that before I hand over to the DAG. The comments, Honourable Mlenzana and Honourable Chair, that you're raising about how we could potentially look at what the law provides for on direct access to these audit fees at the point of appropriation is something that is worth considering. And I think it's something that we need to explore properly, especially where it is evident that the discipline of paying for audit and the ability to ensure that funds that are appropriated move in the right direction, those things may still be weak in some of the sectors where we audit, and we may need a different way of looking at it. Just on the question, Honourable Singh, you raised about whether or not there are any disputes on audit fees. No, they're not. The delay in payment or the option not to pay then hits us long after we've agreed on the audit fees. At the time that every single audit begins, there is an engagement on an audit strategy, which comprises in it the expectation of audit fees. And that is run through a process that is engaged upon with the management team in that particular audit team, as well as the audit committee. So the agreement on audit fees is done upfront. Where there is a shift in terms of the number of hours that are spent and therefore incurring higher audit fees, that's engaged upon upfront. So there's absolutely no instance where any auditee has disputed the audit fees that are due. The question is simply on the ability for them to pay. DAG, can I hand over to you to reflect on the technology and then the debtors and then the spend on consultants? Thank you very much, Honourable Chair.
Thank you, AG.
Thank you, AG. Thank you,
Yes.
AG. And thanks, Chair, and thanks for the good comments. Dealing with the specific aspect that AG asked me to do. So we do sometimes, looking at the consultant, we do sometimes match and look at some of the auditees who are not paying us to see are they using consultants. And in a province such as the Northern Cape, there have been instances where consultants were paid, but were not paid as the Office of the Auditor-General. We have raised those matters with the Premier so that they will be aware that these entities cannot be proclaiming poverty when they are able to pay a consultant, yet they don't see. And I think sometimes it just goes to the discipline of appreciating the fact that they have to be. I think it's something that we should track. It will be an interesting discussion, I think, in future meetings with you to name and shame those auditees that find it necessary to pay the consultants and not pay us. But we have seen practices where it is happening. In terms of technology, Chair, in order for us to do our work better, it will be important that we roll out the technology part of things. We call it a journey because it won't be once off. There's a question as to when are we going to do things. So there are things that we are doing. And I would like to also cover the aspect about what happens to those people. So the team recently implemented a robot that allow us to do work that used to take 200 hours that can be done in less than 4 hours by the robot. It was a basic internal process of allocating payments that we receive from our auditees to be able to ensure that the money has been paid and gets allocated. So what happened in those instances, and it's good to look into case studies, is the individual that used to spend lots of time doing that can be retrained to go and do other things. It's very easier in the audit side to do that because we still need auditors to apply their mind to do an audit opinion. Technology will help us to do the work, surface the exceptions, and the people then spend more time. Instead of going to tick and batch, they spend more time analyzing the exceptions and be able to add more. So we do not think that the immediate impact of using technology will result in people being redundant, but people will start spending more time on things that add more value because the mundane processes can be done by a machine. And that's exactly where we are going. Machines will allow us to be able to, instead of working on a sample basis, to cover more because we'll be able to test 100% of the population. That will then allow us to give better insight to the auditees, but also to the committee in terms of the information that we will surface. In our digital transformation journey, we'll ensure that there's effective change management, that we don't leave our people behind in terms of retraining them to do the work that is relevant. So it's a subject that we are passionate about. to your credit, Chair, you did allude to the fact that we cannot continue carrying briefcase when the transactions that we are auditing are complex. We need to go and deal with it. If you think about it, if you think about compensation fund that deals with such high volume of transaction, you cannot continue to go and audit on a sample basis. You're going to need to go and do some kind of data analytics to look into all the data and be able to pick up exceptions. So we believe is the way to go, but we will be careful that jobs are not lost in the process, but people are doing the work that is much more meaningful. So I've touched on the consultant and I've touched on the technology. AG has touched on the issue around data. So on the data part, we've mentioned that it seems to be a discipline, especially where consultants sometimes are paid and we are not being paid. But also we are exploring discussion with National Treasury. So when you read section 25, section 23 of the PAA, it does give a provision, but it uses the word that the National Treasury or the relevant provincial treasury, as may be appropriate, may, after consulting the AG, direct the audit fees recovered from an auditee, which is not a national or provincial government, be defrayed from a vote on the national or provincial budget identified by the relevant treasury. So the PAA makes that provision. Is a provision we have not used in the past. We are engaging with National Treasury to say, how can we better utilize that particular section where auditees are not paying us? That engagement is happening, and we do hope that we'll find each other with National Treasury, because it does say we're appropriate. So I guess that's the issue that we need to understand as to what will be those instances where it is appropriate. There's been a number of comments around some of the debtors that should be paying us, such as the SOCs. The section allows us to charge penalties, and we do charge interest. There's a question about giving incentives, where people come to us. In most cases, part of the agreement, we do incentivize them by agreeing to write off some of the interest. So when people make agreement, we can say, let's put aside the interest, pay us the capital amount. And in most cases, some other auditees, they do take that. About auditees that do have the financial ability to pay and they're not paying, such as SOCs, I think it goes back to the discipline of appreciating the fact that the audit process is a valuable process and people should continue to pay that. To AG's point, the fees are agreed upfront. So there's no reason as to why they should not adequately budget for the audit fees. I'm just looking if there's any other comments that I might have missed. I think those are the things that have been raised. Chair, on the retaining of the surplus, AG, I think has covered it. When you come back to you with the funding model, it will be clear as to what are we going to ring fence these surpluses for and how do we intend spending them. I'd like to thank you, Chair, and hand back to you. Thank you.
Thank you very much, DAG. Thanks a lot for the presentation, the critical areas which would enhance your work and your teams out there, more especially on the effectiveness of your own operations. It's indeed key that we emphasize the point that relates to the audit of performance. And that is a very elaborate process itself, because it entails some kind of planned journeys right through the depth and length of the country to verify some areas of infrastructure as identified by those who have spent those amounts. So it's a laborative process itself. So I think it's something which we must support. And therefore, if we dig into the reserves, that necessarily begins to inform all spheres of government as to which direction is taken to improve the lives of the people. So I think it's a matter of must that we must as well look into that support. One area which you have not somewhat referred to is the scale of correlation between what you save between the MO process and the actual match with what the Treasury would have to do in terms of supporting resilience of fiscals by own recoveries through that kind of a process. So it's itself the strength of an argument which would give a form of mitigation around that area, which might be that the AG would refer to it when she closes on her part. And I think on the references that you have made, for us from time to time, if we are made to understand these areas, it becomes so better for your own performance in various instances. You are not a money-making institution, you are a money-using institution. So as you use that money, is to enhance the accountability, democracy, and areas that reflect how the country begins to utilize the little it has towards areas that matter for the development of the communities, individuals out there. AG, your closing remarks.
Thank you, Honourable Chair. I also want to agree that the conversation is very useful, certainly for us as well. It helps us understand where the committee thinking is in terms of how you can best support us. And it's useful for us to have been able to dialogue in this way early on while our work on the funding model adjustments is still a work in progress. The conversation certainly helps. And I hope that you've also gotten some comfort around how we are approaching things as Team AGSA. I like your characterization of the AGSA as a money spending institution rather than money making, because all that we do is about generating the type of resources that allow us to fulfill our constitutional mandate, and in a way that's of quality, that's predictable, and importantly, that's relevant to the current circumstances. So with that, Honourable Chair, I think we have enough for now that we can keep working on, and at the appropriate time, we'll dialogue with you as well. In any event, in a short space of time, we're coming to talk to you about the annual report, and then soon thereafter, we'll deal with the budget, which I think will provide yet another very useful opportunity for us just to make sure that we continue to walk together on the funding matters. Thank you very much, Honourable Chair and Honourable Members.
Well, thank you very much, AG, DAG, and your team, Team GSA. We really take pride to the fact that you know the success factor is proven into the character of the institution, and the character of the institution is built behind the solid base of its human resource, which is a critical element which we must always keep the pulse closer to where the buttons are around matters of audit. And the reputation that is then enjoyed as an outcome thereof is based on your undertaking, that I will do this by this time and that time. This would somewhat be what would be realized out of such processes. So that commitment is a commitment which is enjoyed by everybody at that time. I was happy. I was in the House when the President tabled his budget, and I enjoyed the fact that the matters that you have raised in the MFMA audit somewhat got a sense of being captured and the resonance in as far as those plans are concerned, which begins to say the scale, the character, and the actual detail of what you do get realized, recognized at the highest office, and that really gives some form of hope that they will be attended in a way. So while on our side, we would get into some of those municipalities to both to learn their best models and influence those who are not doing that good to do good, and be able to write up some form of a context which is modeled around that kind of influence. So we really appreciate that fact, so that when we support you on the basis of results, and when such results are obtained, we seek to sustain the continuum in as far as such a benefit is concerned. So far, so good, and the country celebrates that kind of a voice. It's not your role to say and so what. You see, your role is to inform the accounting officers, those who have been employed to do their work, to do it on the basis of that kind of information. Take heed into what you want them around areas of better accountability on the use of resources. And if they don't do that, then the issuances which relate to why the Public Audit Act was reviewed would kick in. That's why you are getting into MIs in full steam. And they are giving, you see, celebrated outcomes as well out there. One thing which we celebrate highly as well out of that report is your thumb on the performance. Whether talking about planning, the actual performance, the agreements, and the actual performance, which relate to tell us about the value for money out there. So indeed, our excitement gets to that point. So that we have a feel of how our communities do appreciate or get worried about the presence or absence of service delivery. So you are on it. So we stand to support you really on such. So thank you very much for this. I hope that I'm talking on behalf of the committee.
Yes.
And to say when you come back with a firm report on these matters, I would get into that conversation together and create a solid basis for your financial model in sustaining the institution going forward. So thank you very much, colleagues. Thank you very much, AG and the team. Enjoy your weekend. And
Thank you.
Thank you so much. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. Same to you.
Thanks,
Bye.
AG.
Thank you, Chair.
Thanks, AG.
Colleagues.
Bye, colleagues.
Thank you. Bye.
Bye-bye, Sisi.
Recording stopped.